Hey guys, so it has been a ridiculously long time since my last review, but I am back and I am doing a book review for you. Going forward, there's not going to be any particular schedule to this channel. If I read something and I feel like talking about it with you, I'll post a video. That's how this is going to go from here on out. So today we're going to talk about An Unquiet Mind, a memoir of moods and madness by Kay Redfield Jameson. Now, this author is known in the psychiatric field as really having pushed the boundaries of understanding with regards to manic depression, but she also suffers from the condition herself. And this book chronicles her experiences from when she was very little and she was dealing with her father's manic depression to the point where she decided she wanted to go into psychiatry, psychology, and then discovering that she had this problem herself. Now, before we go any further, I should say that it's very hard to review a book like this without feeling like you're passing judgment on the individual, not even the individual as an author, but the individual as a person, because she had to deal with manic depression in her own life, and if you make a criticism of her telling of her story, it can sometimes seem like you are passing judgment on her experiences, which I'm not trying to do whatsoever. Now, that said, this book is well written, but it is very dry, almost clinical, which kind of makes sense given her profession. I actually listened to the audiobook of this on Audible, and it is read by the author, which tends to kind of perk up a book that may be a little bit slow or difficult to get into, but in this case, it really didn't help much. I went into this book with the hope of trying to further my understanding of manic depression and what it is like for someone to live with those symptoms. And typically when you see a story like this, if you're used to listening to TED Talks about people talking about their conditions or reading various memoirs, there's kind of a running theme that there are plenty of people who get these illnesses and they are completely debilitating, but these stories tend to be positive. They tend to be, well, look, I managed to overcome this and it wasn't easy and I still struggle with it day to day, but look at what I've been able to achieve. And given the author's position in the psychiatric field, you would imagine that this would want to be one of those stories. And in fact, even outside of those types of stories, I think we've kind of been spoiled as far as memoirs go. Memoirs have become almost the young adult fiction for adults, in that they're supposed to be witty and entertaining and uplifting and somehow fulfilling. But really, when you think about it, a memoir is kind of just a contemporary word for biography. So don't go into this book expecting bossy pants or grow Lux into a bar or how I slept my way to the middle or God no or anything like that. It's not intended to be a particularly entertaining text. It's not designed to really necessarily even appeal to the reader. And I think it almost, to the point where it is actually a problem with the text, is that when you write something, even if it is meant to be informative, you have to keep in mind the idea that this is intended for some audience. And the criticism that I would have with this book is that it doesn't seem to do that. It sort of chronicles her experiences, but doesn't necessarily leave much of a message, doesn't seem to be particularly relatable. Now, at the one point where she really does kind of break out of the narrative and try and evangelize a little bit, she talks about lithium as a treatment for manic depression. And it could just be my own personal experiences, but she kind of adamantly argues that no matter how well you think you are doing, you must take lithium. It is the only thing that will work. It doesn't matter how long you have been symptom-free or anything like that. You must be on lithium, which, given her background of trying to fight medication for quite some time, has a lot of credibility, but personally it does make me kind of turn off of that message. If you say it will be incredibly difficult if you do not take medication or something along those lines, I can believe that. The problem, though, is when you state something as an absolute, it really kind of goes in the face of at least my worldview and kind of what I think we culturally want to believe, and that is that there may be challenges that are ridiculously difficult, but it is possible, even if it is ridiculously improbable, to somehow overcome them, and just kind of shutting that door entirely is something that I think really creates almost an abrasive distance between the author and the reader. And in fact, she does talk about some of the symptoms that she experienced while on lithium, and one of them specifically was that she was unable to read. Her eyes weren't able to focus, so she went through years and years of her life without being able to read. At which point, for me, when she's making that argument, I'd say, I'd rather just be mentally ill and be able to enjoy reading these books. Now, again, I'm not passing judgment on her own personal experience, and obviously everybody has different levels of symptoms, but the idea of saying, here is how terrible it is when you are successfully treated, and you must be treated, there is no possible other way, don't even think about it, is kind of difficult to wrap your head around. So ultimately, I'm not going to recommend that you get into this book. It's fairly short, but it's hard to get into, and she can be fairly abrasive when she's writing. I'm looking forward to kind of exploring some other books by people who have suffered from psychological issues and seeing if perhaps they would be more entertaining or at least relatable. In particular, I want to pick up the book adaptation of Wishful Drinking, and I'll probably review that on here as well. So those are my thoughts on An Unquiet Mind. If you've read the book or you're thinking about reading the book and have some thoughts to share, feel free to do those down in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.